Torture is a violation of the rights of the victim and a punishable offense. The physiological effects may seem mild, but usually lead to lasting psychological and emotional problems.
Torture goes to the heart of the dignity of a human person. Torture essentially crushes man's humanity. You know, the psyche is destroyed by vulnerability to torture.
I did it! Yes!
We discover that torture tends to happen at interrogation. So the law has provided that video evidence can be taken during this interrogation because it serves to deter people from inflicting tools of torture or manipulating the testimony of the person being interrogated.
Despite the existing legal framework in place mandating the video recording of interrogations by the police or military and prohibiting the admission of confessions obtained under duress, except as substantive evidence of acts of torture, numerous reports highlight the contrary in actual practice.
As observers, we have not seen what that national preventive mechanism has done to make sure that incidents of torture in Nigeria do not happen. And you live in this country, you are witness to all the allegations of torture that we get in the media every day. It shows that public officials do engage in acts of torture in this country.
When I came into office in 2018, one of the first things I did was to set up a panel of inquiry, a public hearing, so that people could come and lodge their complaints on issues of torture, issues of inhuman and degrading treatment, issues of violence against them, resulting from the operations of law enforcement agents, insurgency, and so on and so forth. And a large number of Nigerians came out.
In view of the high scale of allegations and complaints of torture, ill treatment, and gender-based violence by non-state actors and state officials, including police, SARS, military, and other enforcement agencies, the effectiveness of the police oversight mechanisms, the Police Service Commission, and National Human Rights Commission remains questionable, not to mention the lack of proper funding of the National Committee Against Torture, established with a mandate to visit places of detention and investigate any complaints of torture therein.
We should be independent. We should have our office outside the Ministry of Justice, because if the police torture somebody and we report him to the Ministry of Justice and they prosecute him, is the Ministry of Justice again that will defend the police because it's an official. So we said that our office should be independent. We should be, our funding should be independent. Our staff should be independent. Unfortunately, we have not been able to achieve that at the moment.
One of those things that we need in security sector reform is to reform training through curriculum harmonization, such that agencies will be able to operate together, since the problems confronting us now have no single meaning. They are cut across agencies. So we believe that we have to address this through training.
The Nigerian Army personnel, most of them have been accused of unprofessional activities, either through torture and dealing with the civilians. And we feel that there is need to establish the human rights unit so that we can monitor the activities. They should know that people can lodge complaints against the activities, so that can also, in a way, can be able to strengthen the Armed Forces Act, and then the personnel will be able to act professionally.
The Anti-Torture Act 2017 stipulates access to legal assistance and rights to claim compensation for torture and ill treatment. The Administration of Criminal Justice Act 2015 also provides for damages and restitution for victims of crime. The big question is, how well is the actual application of these provisions?
The concept of that rehabilitation is not enough there. It's not there. And that's part of the recommendation that is also coming up, that we are saying that it is not just in dealing with torture. You need to, yes, say, put up a process that ensures that there is no, how do I put it, ambiguity in terms of what happens to the perpetrators when they commit it, but also what happens to the victims that have gone through that process.
It's a real challenge in the criminal justice system. It needs to be victim-centered, not only jailing the accused person. How have you tried to deal with the effects on the victim? We now have compensation for victims of human rights violation. For instance, during the SARS panel here, in the Lagos panel and also in the one in Abuja, we awarded about 146 million in a compensation to victims of human rights violation. So not only the suspects, but the victims are now getting some compensation. And also, we have established a shelter. We have also established a counseling unit in the commission. And this is to make sure that they appear in the panel and the trauma and some of the effects on these victims can be addressed. The counseling unit counsels them and tries to deconstruct their mind to manage the trauma on them as a result of this torture.
While commending the Nigerian government's efforts at enacting the Anti-Torture Act 2017, the Nigerian Police Act 2020, and the ongoing police reforms, as well as revision of the Police Force Order 237 to incorporate international standards, the UN Committee Against Torture recommends the state party to bring its definition of torture fully into line with Article 1 of the Convention Against Torture and explicitly add the following separate purpose to the definition of torture, or for any reason based on discrimination of any kind, as well as the inclusion of explicit provisions in the Anti-Torture Act 2017 for the criminalization of attempts to commit torture and for the exclusion of torture from the scope of amnesty and pardon provisions. The victims to obtain redress as well as access full rehabilitation programs through independent judicial panels set up, while equally allocating resources to implement such programs. Brought to you by Prower with the support of IRCT. To continue, get part 3.